for being on time. I mean, 2 p.m. in this big building and this remote part of the building. I mean, so I mean, quite impressive. So super happy to have you today for this topic, which is one of the most heated topic of the online regulations. And so we'll try to do something, let's say, productive and insightful. So, because this topic has been debated many times, more often than not in a very super helpful way. So we'll try to do something interesting. So this session is about, so I'm Jean-Christophe Le Toquin. I'm the co-founder of the Trust and Safety Forum. And so I will introduce you to the panelists as we go one by one, because if I give you the biography of everybody, you will probably forget the last one or the first one before I finish. So we'll do it one by one. Topic is balance between privacy and the protection of privacy, protection also of the vulnerable part of the populations, and in particular children. So as I said, this topic has been most discussed. If you are here in this room, it's probably because you know it's a difficult topic. I mean, you have seen and we have seen a trend of implementing encryption on messaging apps in the past years, and more messaging apps have implemented encryption in order to protect the security, the privacy of their users. But this comes with a cost, which is that if you do this, of course, you lose insight or in what's happening on these communications, and then this may be causing harm to vulnerable part of the population, in particular children. So we see this trend, and we see also the attempt of regulations to, find a way to mitigate the adoption of encryption on these private communications, and in particular the CSA, Child Sexual Abuse Regulation, which is being still discussed in the Parliament. So, and we have this tension between the two. So in order to have interesting discussion, so we brought two NGOs on the side of child protection, so who will tell us about what are the threats and how they see this trend of implementing encryption and why they think it's a problem. And then we didn't put people that were bluntly in favor of encryption, but rather almost. But that almost is a big difference. But rather people who have a privacy and security background and who would come to provide I would say more nuanced perspective on how you can try to balance security and privacy. And so the hope is to have a dialogue. We had a dialogue in preparing this session. So but hopefully we will be as good as we have been on this prep call. And so that's everybody comes with new ideas. We'll try to keep some time for questions. So at the end of the session. So that the kind of the scenario. So we'll hear first from the NGOs, Chameleon and Child Focus, and each of them will have their own kind of perspective. So we'll start with Societa SIM. So if you, fortunately, the screen is a bit small, so you don't see that's actually Societa on the picture. It's not Societa on. So let's forget about this issue, this little issue. And so Societa is so from Chameleon. Chameleon is a French NGO also active in the Philippines. Societa is an activist in her own words. Has been this for more than 15 years, promoting children's rights. She's working in schools with children and teenagers. She's delivering training with parents and professionals on, issue threats for minors. She leads the French social mission of Chameleon, this NGO. She will tell you more about this, with focus on incest and sexual abuse against children online. And so she is, as part of this role, she's also an advocacy manager. So expect her to be straight to the point and to tell you why, we should care about protecting children online and on messaging apps in particular. So with this, the screen is ready. So over to you, Societa.
First, I want to thank the Trust and Safety Forum for inviting Chameleon. to speak about such an important topic today. Our association has been dedicated to promote children's rights and fight sexual violence for 26 years, now in Philippines and in France, and we focus on combating incest and cyberpedocrime. Our main action in France is prevention in schools. So we do workshops about sexual violence and risk associated with internet. And we are very concerned about explosion of cyberpedocrime and exponential proliferation of XAM, easily found on dark and clear web. So let me share some concrete examples about how pedocriminals target kids and try to abuse them through games, social medias, and after encrypted message. So the first situation is about grooming. I don't know if the audience is already knows this term. It's when a predator tries to pretend being a minor to gain the trust of a kid, and progressively they become friends. So the case of Lucy, 8 years old, she was approached by a stranger who offered to her Fortnite skins and helped her to pass some levels on this game. After a few weeks, he asks her personal number to talk on WhatsApp and sends her daily message to know more about her private life, if she has brothers or sisters, where she lives, and he will try to harm her sexually after gaining his confidence. The second situation is corruption of minors. For example, we heard a lot in schools about kids who are playing on video games or on social media, and some stranger sends them messages like, "Don't click on this video, it's really amazing." Of course, they're curious and they click about it. And where does he get? They get on hentai, porn, or sexual abuse on kids. So using graphic aesthetics of anime, manga, etc., with this, the predators push the boundaries of that kind of minors to less level their intimacy in order to transgress it, and they became more and more interested in sexual contents and practice also with the corruption of minors, and they also move on a message after private message. The third situation is about an older girl, 14 years old. It's about sextortion. She thinks talking about her boyfriend, 17 years old. He asks her for nudes first, and then he tells her that if she doesn't send more pictures of sexual favor or money, he will release it among her friends and family. We know that about sextortion, it targets children more aged from 11 to 13, and they produce themselves a lot of sexual content, which are used by pedocriminals. So this circulates a lot on internet. And the fourth and last situation, which can be found on applications like WhatsApp or Skype or Messenger, is live streaming. And in this form of online exploitation, pedocriminals can order the rape of kids in real time, live, in exchange of dozens of dollars. The young victims come from poor countries, as the Philippines, like an epicenter. Offenders typically come from Occidental countries and pay adult traffickers or family of the children to abuse them. In Philippines, nearly 500,000 children have been trafficked to produce child sexual exploitation material. So it means 1 in every 100 Filipino kids. But this issue transcends borders. More and more countries are with live streaming, including Europe and Africa. So we need to fight this society problem, and the numbers are really alarming. Each second, 2 XAM are shared worldwide in the world. So it means 88 million photos and videos of sexual violence on children reported by internet in 2022. For all this reason, we support the XAR regulation because it is really important to fight against this proliferation of XAM. And also, it is important to integrate detection of child criminal content in end-to-end encryption with all the messagery we saw before. what we find also really alarming is that the people who see all this kind of content try to abuse children in the real life also. So we've got a continuum between online violence and violence in real life. The more and more proliferation of kind of these contents will improve the appetence also of people who are not pedophiles but can become pedocriminal by being attracted by all this proliferation in all this message. And we know that they use Telegram or X, for example, to contact the kids after and try to abuse them in real life.
Thank you. And then there was the last slide on 2/3. What's?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, in Europe, no, in France, sorry, in Europe, 2 out of 3 kids have been sexually abused with violence during their childhood. So yeah, it's even in France, it's really enormous.
2/3 of the
2
children?
out of 3 during their childhood.
And
Yeah.
abuse, what do you mean by?
Abuse is not like rape, it's like exposed to sexual violence. It can be like porn. On internet, right. So it can be pornography, exhibition, corruption of minors, sexting, all the things we saw before.
Okay, yeah, and then that makes sense. We know that the average age now for children to watch porn is 10 years old. It used to be 14 or 12 a few years ago, and now down to 10.
Yeah, below 10.
And I got some stats recently. 66% of 11 to 12 years old have been exposed to hard porn. 66%. Hard porn between 11 and 12.
And on the counterterrorism side, the use of children and the use of porn and emotional degrading content has been used by many terrorist groups out there to find the disenfranchised and then to turn them into what they want them to be.
And the kids become addicted to that kind of content also psychologically. They, even if they were exposed not voluntary, after they seek it voluntary. So it's really, and on a Finland study, we see that a lot of people who are exposed to that kind of content when they were kids, they can seek it also when they become adults.
And actually, there was a study recently done in a classroom in France. And basically, they exposed some porn content in a class, not hard, but porn content to people, to young people. And what they measured after is that 1/3 became porn addict. 1/3 became porn addict after that. 1/3 were hiding there. They didn't want to see and watch. So basically, they closed their eyes, they didn't watch. And the other 1/3, they just were shocked. So basically, this is kind of a shock, psychology shock. But what third became addict after that, at 11 to 12 years old?
And we also see that even if they are shocked the first time they see that kind of content, if they get used to it after, they don't have empathy anymore. And they just block their emotions. So in online or just in schools, if there are bullying, for example, or kind of, they will not react because they get used to it by online content. So that's why we try to raise awareness also of parents, professionals, and general public about it. And with our manifesto, with the regulation, we also encourage raising awareness by global media campaign about pedocriminality and also increase the means to fight against cyberpedocrime.
You want to say something? You please.
And this desensitization operation that these predators use is really, for us, for the good side of the fight, really for us is the impetus of collaboration and awareness, because without that, then these kids become isolated in their own world.
So now, from this quite gloomy picture, but which is a reality, and it's important to understand the multiple dimensions of the relationship or the exposure or of sexual nature of children, and how, I mean, from porn to the, I mean, live stream is the most extreme example, but it's kind of a diversity of things, and I don't think the society today really cope with the issue properly. I think we are going to see the impact on younger generations in the near future. So moving on to Tiana, because this was just the first part of the introductions to why it's a problem. Second part was given by Tiana Popovic from Child Focus. Tiana, you have been for 7 years with Child Focus. You have been a case manager, so dealing with missing children. Then you have been an analyst. Now you have been, you're now a policy officer. You are active also in Child Focus, which is a major Belgium association for missing and exploited children. You are part of ECLAG, ECLEG, which is a coalition of NGOs advocating for child's rights and in favor of the CSA regulation, Child Sexual Abuse Regulation, which is being discussed in the Parliament at the moment at the EU level. And interestingly, as well, you have an anthropological background, so which gives a different perspective maybe from the regular, I would say, lawyer like myself or technical people or people in security. So, so your role is to now elevate the debate to tell us about, okay, why we should protect children.
Thank you. Also, thank you for inviting me to this forum. And yes, I am an anthropologist as a background, so I will probably treat this discussion more as a discourse. But just to set a scene properly, so following the proposal by the EU Commission for the Prevention and Combat of Child Sexual Abuse Material, so known as the CSA regulation, which foresees preventive measures and detection orders in interpersonal communication. As Jean-Christophe said, there was like a fierce debate that started regarding the screening of conversations to identify instances of child sexual abuse. Now, this discourse is actually grounded in propositions concerning privacy, and basically it unnecessarily frames a competition between, on the one hand, the right to privacy, and on the other hand, the need for protection. So in the next, I think 5 minutes, I will expose these propositions in order to propel the debate forward, because the debate is stuck right now. The discussion is stuck in council. The parliament has already voted on the CSA regulation, not as we want to see it, because all the tricky things are not anymore part of the regulation, but in the council it is still debated. As Soshata already explained, the prevalence and the huge problem we are facing, well, our organization is also facing these situations every day. And it's based on that experience that we are convinced that the CSA regulation is necessary to combat this online pandemic.
And you have, sorry, you have slides as well, so
yeah,
I don't know if you...
I waited with this slide because I wanted to, you know, this is kind of a harsh story. I will give you some time to read it also, but I will also read it out loud. So to show you how important this CSA regulation is, let me tell you the story of Lola. Lola is an invented name, but it's a real case. So it's a real case that came from NECMEC to Belgium. And basically Lola was 10 years old when she was first abused by her father. And now, 17 years later, her photos and her videos are still massively shared online. So to say how massively that is, well, she was discovered in 190,000 files, seized by the police from 12,900 offenders. And the predators or the offenders within the dark web are actually referring to Lola as their favorite. And they are still discussing right now how she might be looking as an adult. So this is really important to understand the massive scale of the proliferation of child sexual abuse material. And I will further illustrate it with some research from Michael Salter. And I think that Soshata also touched a bit on this research, so it's really recent, and it's on the behavior of sexual offenders. And basically, what he sees is that offenders who are engaging in child sexual abuse of children are using more and more private software to cover their tracks and to facilitate the offending. So a fan obsession is not uncommon. I mean, Lola is also part of a fan obsession. I mean, there are people who are fantasizing about her right now, fantasizing how she might look, but also trying to seek her private information. So where she lives, where she works, who her husband is, and yeah, her husband is really lucky to be with her, and those kind of things. So despite all these stories, how horrendous they might seem, of child victims and of survivors, coupled with the increasing rise of numbers each year of the dissemination of child sexual abuse content, when we look at the discourse, what is prevailing is the discourse on privacy. So you see the balance is tipped towards privacy. So what are the prevailing propositions there, and how can we strike a more balanced approach? So I will use the discourse and try to peel the onion. So let me give you a couple of observations. So to come to the first observation, and this is a concern that has been voiced already quite often, is that basically the detection orders will unproportionally violate the right to privacy. I will say it like that, when you propose or when you say it in these kind of terms, basically the discourse is narrowing privacy right to one single right, and that is communication privacy. Whilst in reality, privacy right involves many different rights. It's a composite right. There is a right to information, there is a right to be forgotten, there is a right to access, there is a right to non-discrimination. Not mentioning all other digital rights of children, which is a right to access to age-appropriate content, a right to data protection, a right to information also. So actually, it involves a lot more rights, but within this discourse, it's only narrowed down to one right, which is communication privacy. When you place, and this is a second observation, is when you place communication privacy above all other rights, you actually create an unequal power relationship between the right holders concerned. So basically, on the one side, you put the general population, let's say John and Smith, whose privacy is violated, and on the other hand, you're putting the children. But basically, children's rights, they are indivisible and they are also interdependent. And when you put it like that, you basically are saying that the rights of more adult people are more important than children's rights. But even when you say, yeah, but there is the child to privacy for a child, so a communication privacy, well, how do you actually balance that with the right to be forgotten for a child whose pictures have been shared massive scale and keep on continuing being shared? It brings me down to the third observation, my apologies. So when discussing actually privacy violations, the focus often centers on potential risk. I think I got the mic right now. I hope you heard me before, but now I feel that my voice resonates more. So when discussing privacy violations, the focus often centers on potential risk. But what about the very real dangers faced by countless children today due to the unsafe designs of online platforms and their insufficient measures to stop the spreading of online child sexual abuse content? So we are actually having a potential risk versus a real risk within the equation. But even how do you define the potential risk? And actually, tech experts do maintain that if you allow detection orders in interpersonal communication, people will only be exposed to the first type of risk. So you see a person who is going to the airport and he gets a proper screening for any types of metal. Well, basically, experts are saying to us, well, people will only be exposed to that first type of risk. It will be the screening of their conversations, but it's not, getting information on their conversations or interpreting their conversations. So it's only actually expose them to the screen to make sure if there is metal, then it will beep. Bringing this to my last observation is, do we consistently prioritize our privacy when purchasing online services? So whether we are buying plane tickets or we are ordering books, we often consent to relinquishing some part of our privacy within the transaction, and this is mostly motivated for a personal interest. So how can we actually extend that motivation to a broader cause of protecting children's rights. And actually, there was a survey done, the Eurobarometer. It has also been repeated independently by ECPAT, and it shows that the majority is actually in favor of CSA regulation and is also okay with the fact of relinquishing some form of their privacy in order to protect children. This conversation and panel is all about how do we strike a balance. Well, let me just give an example from our work. When parents call us and they seek our advice within the helpline for their children's interactions online, we have to give due consideration to all rights involved. So we will urge parents to respect their children's rights to privacy, and at the same time, we will also urge parents to take up their duty to protect their children. So if we want to carefully balance these different rights, we need to, first of all, have a good conversation, do some media education, and also provide informed consent. So how do we strike a balance? Well, if we want to strike a proper balance, we need to give due consideration, I'm here again, due consideration to all rights involved and all right holders. We need to focus better on the translation of a general interest, of a personal interest, let's say, into a general interest more effectively. And we also need to take a political decision that will include encryption and interpersonal communication within the regulatory framework, and it's then up to case law and up to the competent authorities to balance these rights. And if you allow me just to go a bit further on the chain of thoughts, is that when we look at the discussion of privacy and protection, what we actually see is that it reflects a more broader lack of trust in authorities, its public authorities, European institutions, its companies. And maybe, you know, AI will provide a pathway that can help us beyond the trust issue. So let us imagine in the future, if there is AI, you know, that can erase their own proper data as part of their processing capabilities, but providing useful input to child protection agencies and to law enforcement. Then we would go beyond the trust issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tiana. So as the time is running, and we have, I see there is a lot of tension already, considering all the issues. And this is just about children. And tomorrow, from 10:45 in this room, from 10:45 to noon, we'll discuss about the broader population and the adults. I mean, the teenagers and the adults and the women. I mean, targeted by by male people. I mean, most generally, are also suffering from the same type of, I mean, disregard for their privacy and the protection of our intimacy. So we are going to discuss this for the broader population tomorrow and see what are the solutions that we could discuss. So I will just briefly introduce our two gentlemen, but maybe because of running out of time, and I would also offer the room with possibility to ask questions, and you would answer them maybe. And then if there are no questions, then you can just respond to your perspective. So two different perspectives. So Hervé, on my immediate right, is an entrepreneur in fintech, in digital media measurement, data protection, cybersecurity. You developed different companies, three of them in particular, and one of them being a unicorn at the time, Net Value. And now you act as an advisor to help other businesses to grow. And so you have this kind of privacy, fintech, industry background. And Romeo is more on the fighting terrorism, intelligence, cybersecurity side of things. And so you are also an advisor to, you have been advisor to companies through a global consulting company. And so you bring this kind of intelligence and defense also background, so different perspective. So I will let you, respond. From your cybersecurity side, privacy perspective, how do you cope with this kind of situation that has been described to us? What are the kind of next step that you foresee? But before, I have a roaming microphone. So do we have, in response to what has been discussed, is there any question from the room? And then I will let our gentleman respond.
Thank you. I think very great and insightful presentation. With us who have kids, it's very disappointing obviously, where we are in technology. But I think as I ask this question, I'm addressing the whole room here with AI. So here's the interesting thing. With AI, you can now manipulate and change the pictures so that the pictures don't necessarily have the facial, the recognition of the face. So from a regulatory standpoint and a litigation standpoint, can you actually go after the bad actors who have the content on their devices, or those who produce the content? How are we able to protect our kids, or has the regulation actually extended beyond that for that?
Quite a question. So, who is feeling? Romeo, do you feel?
Sure, I can try.
That was a tough one.
I can try, and definitely not an expert. I mean, the EU AI Act has, through much fanfare, has really, I think it's setting the guardrails for this kind of topic, right? And I think that because high-risk systems are outside of the purview of the AI Act, whether this is going to be high risk, because now it's a very specific use case for identification, for perhaps going into the transmission methods, perhaps going in through the tactics, training, and procedures of such tactics and of such predators, then perhaps there needs to be a dialogue perhaps on what high-risk capabilities should be included so long as they're caveated. That's my sole opinion on the AI Act on high-risk systems, but I hope that some of my esteemed colleagues here would also offer their own opinions.
Well, I mean, yeah, there is, of course, the AI Act that maybe foresees in water labeling these pictures, because the problem with, I mean, from the point of view of child focus, even if it's AI generated, it is still problematic. I mean, and as Soshata was explaining, pictures of child sexual abuse, whether it's a real child or whether it's an invented or a montage of a child of different things, you know, it does encourage people to offending. There is real study evidence that shows that offenders that look at this material will go on hands abusing a child. There is a stepping stone. It has been shown in research. So for us, it's very clear this is problematic. But we don't want law enforcement to spend resources on identification of a child when there is no real child. So that's why it's important to have the AI Act, to know, to label, and to train us also in being able to train, I mean, experts and hotlines and all who are analyzing content to be able to say, okay, this picture is AI generated, this is not. But this is very complicated. So I think we should also, within the regulatory framework, you know, try to put measures in place for applications that can too easily generate these type of images without any filters. So we need to, you know, as a CSA regulation is basically doing, putting forward mitigation measures, safe by design applications who have to follow certain rules, and then, of course, within the AI Act, make it an obligation to label these kind of pictures, that at least law enforcement should not spend resources on child identification. Thank you.
But I can as well, so yes, I'm going as well to try to answer that and give a kind of perspective onto what I have experienced into my, let's say, long experience into either privacy or data management. First of all, I think that AI tomorrow could be, as I am as well struggling with the fact that we can see today everything that can ChatGPT do or Gemini do and so on, and we are amazed. And then when you're seeing what's going on social networks, you don't understand why this content that means going after people is let go. Basically, the content is letting go by the platform. So if you think that I could analyze something that is, let's say, a bad wording and just not publish it. So I could have, as a platform, I could have a chance to say, no, I'm not going to publish that message or that picture. So this is the first point. I think we need to make sure, but the problem is that if you think about platforms and social networks, what they need is users. And not only they need users, but they need usage. It's like TV, they need an audience to live. So basically, if tomorrow they were to take out half of the messages out, they would leave. They would basically have less users and have less usage. And of course, if you think about everything, they say, okay, you know, you need to be 15 years old to register on a social network. Average age in Europe for a child on TikTok is 8 years old. 8 years old. So basically, so everyone is closing his eyes because, yes, you know, they are participating to this network. So I think we have first a responsibility to potentially make sure that, yes, we need to change that rule and make sure that only, let's say, at least 15 more years old would access that. And we have done not more on that. This is my first point. So if we were to avoid young children to get access to those networks, we would have less problems. Then on AI, I think, you know, where AI could help is about image. If an image is published, I can think tomorrow, not now, of course, but tomorrow, that this image could be, 1, analyzed by AI, 2, changed. So basically, the content wouldn't appear as it is posted by probably bad people. And I think the AI has the capability to do that. So now we need to see the willingness of platform to put that in place. And this is where we come back to government and authorities to be able to do that. Because, of course, you know, it's easy to say that, okay, as she was saying, you know, I have been an advocate of privacy because I have been protected users and encrypted information so that users, what we call in cybersecurity, zero knowledge. So basically, we don't know, we cannot access your content, your information, because we encrypt it, and you, as a user, you have the keys to decrypt it. We don't have it. So I am a fan of that. But when it comes to children, and when it comes to certain situations, I think we need to put inside the technologies ways to manage and to be able to go beyond that rule. And typically, I think there are technologies today, such as shared, let's say, secret, that are coming. So basically, I could not decrypt your data, but let's say we need 5 people would get a piece of the secret to decrypt the data, and we would need 3 people to decrypt the information. So in that case, we would think that we can really protect your data tomorrow, but then if really something is coming out of, let's say, some information, then we could have 3 person deciding to decrypt the data and then analyze it and give it to for law enforcement and so on. So I think, again, the technology can be used to really make sure that we can protect children, of course, and even adults as well. And of course, you know, the last part is about the content that is generated. So most of the content today has been generated by humans. And now we're going to move into a world where the content is going to be generated mostly by machines and AI. And we will need to identify that content as well to make sure that there is a treatment and that we can consider that that content is coming again from a human or for AI. Because right now, I think there is a hole into the fact that if I'm producing, let's say, porn content from AI, who is responsible? You know, it's more difficult now because it's a machine that has produced the content. And so how do you, let's say, law enforce the machine? Who is behind the machine? So it's going to be a lot of work to be done. So that's why we need to make sure we can, let's say, identify. So the KYC is important. So maybe, you know, tomorrow, I think on social network, we will need to go to KYC. You know, what people are anonymized, you know. It's easy now. I can do that something. I put a fake name. Everything is fake. They cannot recognize me. So I am happy, you know, and I am very much, you know, protected. If tomorrow I need to put my KYC to register on a social network, I will probably be very careful to push bad content because I know I'm going to be taken at some point. So I think, you know, there are technologies there, and it's a matter of governments and authorities to pushing that, and platforms to accept that, hey, you know, maybe you're going to lose some users, but you are going to protect better the children and the people.
Yeah, thank you. This is a perfect kind of summary of what we wanted to discuss on this session, which is the different ways to mitigate risks and inject more balance. But of course, some people who are really much on the privacy would object to things that you are proposing. But now it also depends on, and as you made the point, when you have a service massively used by children, then do we apply the same rule as a service, used by law enforcement or military? Obviously, that's all different services. Robio, you were eager to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something, and it really touched me when she said the right to privacy and the need for protection. This semantic nuance is really very important to address, because the scale that we showed here was like this. That's the right and need. But this is the right and the right. for both privacy and protection. And that's the balance I think that we need to find. And my role here really is to provide the control mechanisms. Because cybersecurity, we love control mechanisms, right? Guardrails, and there's a layering, sort of peeling the onion in the cybersecurity side. Because the cyber control mechanisms is great for just cyber protection. Putting I don't like using the perimeter, but a boundary so that these predators can be stopped, and if they're inside, they can be pushed outside, right? But the second layer of this onion really is a holistic look at trust and safety, because trust and safety is about protecting the edge populations, right? In as much as this is a very dark subject, this is still not the mainstream population. And so KPIs of companies today, right? Hervé said usage is a #1 KPI, right? And absolutely right. But how do we then move this KPI of usage from a mainstream population and ameliorate that and match it and converge it with a KPI that is conducive for both, right? These edge populations, right? Edge networks. And then on the AI side, right? Part of the AI life cycle is data labeling, right? And that is us, the population that is hired mostly in Asia and low salaried countries to label the data, right? So the training, the education, the collaboration, and the awareness so that these people that are labeling the data and that gets pushed into our machine learning algorithms need to be addressed as well, because otherwise this data can be poisoned by AI through that bad labeling.
Thank you, Meo. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions. Do we have a burning question?
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. A great defense in sports and life often loses to a great offense. So in protecting people from drinking and driving, it's complex, right? Automobile companies actually want the car to be totaled and bought new. Insurance companies, who knows? The question is, how can we actually do offense in the legislation framework? How much is this a slap on the wrist of the man who's abusing a child versus capital punishment?
I think you should have the final words because we are tight on time. Diana, Sacheta, you want to answer or just share your thoughts of the...
No, of course, and that brings us back again to what we were explaining about the equation. And I think that in the regulatory framework, if you build in all these safeguards that are there, and there are plenty of safeguards, I mean, and I was showing those risks, you know, there is a risk of screening, there is a risk of being criminalized. You know, within the debate, generally, there is a whole group of people who say, well, you don't have to put in detection orders because then you will criminalize young children who are just sharing intimate images. Well, no, the regulation is not about, okay, you send an image and then you go immediately to prison. I mean, there are so many safeguards in between. There is a moderation that will first see the images. And then at that time, if it is problematic and if that person is linked to many victims, you know, then there is maybe criminal resources that need to be tapered on. So I find that within the regulatory framework, there are many, many safeguards that do not punish the general population for protecting the children. That's just the mindset or the discourse that is being created. But it's actually not the case if you go through the regulation. There are so many different steps inside. There are so many safeguards. And actually what we only want to do is discourage people of offending. Let's say prevention, discourage, and that's a warning. If you address and you make a regulatory framework that gives the same rules and playing field to all companies, you will basically discourage also a lot of offenders just by giving this warning. So there will be no offending. And then, yes, for the people who still continue to find ways to offend, well, then you have to focus your resources on infiltrating in their networks and getting them. But the minor cost of having some privacy that you will relinquish, which only creates inconveniences, let's say, yeah, that's a price to pay. Yeah, that's, I think, a good price to pay.
And what I wanted to add is it's not just a technological debate, it's an ethical debate on what we want for us and for our kids, because predators can be so creative with technologies and it goes really fast. For example, with IA, they can use it to pretending being younger in FaceTime session, for example, for grooming. Or also, if they take some picture from kids, from the parents, they can have scenario, and the AA makes like a movie with it, like live streaming, but just virtual for them. So we can see it's really easy for people, even without informatic knowledge, to crack that kind of code, because this technology can be accessible by a lot of people. Just one example, I don't know if you've heard about Kali, who was one of the most targeted people, pedocriminal by Europol. He was researched for sharing a lot of XAM worldwide, and in fact, he didn't have any informatic knowledge before. He just learned by himself, by reading like on really easy on web. So we can all get into this debate, and we need to all get into this debate with all stakeholders, including young people, kids, not only adults, by the way. It's democratical scale.
Thank you. So this was a quite intense discussion. So I mean, thank you